the All Black team, when they are firing, play at a speed that most of the other teams around the world certainly can't live with. And it would be easy just to say it was tempo and it was speed of ball that was killing the Springboks early and was making the All Blacks look so good. But when you actually look at it a little bit more, it was actually how they generated that. They generated it not just through great strikes and cleaning out rucks harder than the Springboks could get around the corner and playing quickly. They did it through things like their kicking game and not just, put a kick down and hope for the best. They were doing things like kicking off the second pair, which is obviously sometimes Geordie or Bodie, and they were able to get either hit grass or get a back three member of the Springboks by themselves, and they were deep. So therefore, what sort of kick returned was another long kick. And this was when the opportunity arose to have a decent crack at the counter-attacking. And when you're having a crack off the third kick, that means the defensive line isn't set. So you're always going to get those little half breaches, or you're always going to be able to see a softer part to have a crack at when you're a Talia or you're a Will Jordan. And that was, I guess, something that really stood out early doors and how they used that. And then they just, I guess, the other thing that struck me early, which would have been a dagger through the Springboks, is everything that the Springboks are based on. Everything the Springboks game and physical and mindset sort of puts itself above everyone else is forward dominance. Well, we were getting scrum penalties early, and we were repelling any line-out drives and winning the kicking contest. Well, we looked like we were the gurus of the kicking contest. Every time Talia chased, every time Will Jordan chased, the Springboks backfield was in disarray as far as taking anything. Obviously, Colby's a small man, so it's always going to be a 50-50 crack there if the kicks are good. But they also isolated. Williamson was back there a lot, who was the Springbok 10. But because of how you go when you kick when the structures of when someone kicks, often the 10 is in the backfield. Well, he couldn't catch a cold. And every time that they went up on him, Talia wasn't always catching it. But what stood out about Talia is every time Talia chased, there was a contest. And there was usually scraps. And invariably, we got the scraps. And from there, we were able to just keep changing the point of attack. We were able to keep the ball moving. And sometimes it looked like touch footy. Boys would get to the edge and go, oh, I don't like this. We'll just go back infield a bit. But it never allowed the Springboks to set. And it never allowed them to get that physical dominance, which you might have actually seen a bit in the second half, where the Springboks were able to set their line and able to fight rucks, which brought themselves back into the game. But in that first 20 or 30 minutes, suddenly it was 17-0. Suddenly the Springboks are taking quick line-out throws and then throwing balls at their feet. Not because they can't pass the ball, but because, I guess, they wouldn't have had to expect to do that sort of stuff. We talked about the scoreboard pressure on Friday's show, Kirsten. If we can start well and we can take opportunities, then it's going to take the Springboks out of the game that they want to play, which is that big brute force kicking game, and that's their best chance of being the All Blacks. Well, all of a sudden, they're taking quick line-outs. They're turning down shots at goal to go to a line-out drive after 20 minutes because they're 17-0 down. Then that doesn't work. Then they decide that after 35 minutes being 17-0 down, that's a good time to take a shot at goal. That first half rattled them like I don't think they've been rattled for quite some time.
Ches and Colby, try or no try? 50-50.
It was a massive moment, though.
Huge moment. Big moment in the game. Every South African said try.
Yeah, they would. They would. That for me was a massive moment.
And Will Jordan didn't release the ball on the way to Aaron Smith's try.
Was that coming from South Africa too?
There's been a couple of moments that people picked up on.
Yeah.
That the All Blacks got the rub of the green when there were all these 50-50 calls. Often teams that lose find the rub of the green analysis. I mean, I think... Let's be honest, this South African team's still going to be bloody good at the World Cup. They've still got Andre Pollard to come back, hopefully. They've got Khaleesi to come back. Steph du Toit will probably start. Maybe a couple of others that came off the bench will be in their starting team, not coming off the bench. They are going to be an outstanding team at the World Cup. And as you said last year, I wouldn't want to play them in the quarterfinal.
No, and I think what you saw, like the big thing that I took away from that first half is that All Blacks defence, phenomenal. Particularly the forwards, they all defended well, but take a look at some of the defence of Sam Cane, Ardie Savea and Frizzell. They weren't just tackling people and put Scott Barron in there. I was going to say, and Brody Tack, I've just named the entire forward pack now, but they were absolutely cutting these big men in half, and I think that would, again, you talk about the psychological advantage, you talk about making somebody or some team go somewhere else that they hadn't planned on going. That's what was doing that. The second half, I think, obviously the Boks came back into it. And I won't say they were always going to, but it helps when you probably bring on, I counted 2, if not 3. Probably Vermeulen probably doesn't quite fall in this category anymore, but certainly in Detroit and Marks, if I was to name a World 15 to play for your life tomorrow, they would be in it.
And they're on the bench.
And they were on the bench.
There's no way they play that team against us again off the bench.
No, I was talking to someone on when was it, last night on the Blower, has an intimate knowledge of head coach or director of rugby now, and he said this is classic him. He loves to play a few mind games with the boys, so that's what would be going on there. But
is this Erasmus or is this
Nanaba? No, it's Erasmus. Yeah. I mean, you'd have to think come World Cup time, Detroit especially will be there. Marks, they've often gone this route. But Detroit especially, and I'd say Dwayne Vermeulen will go very close indeed. But the thing is, and people will say, oh, the big impact they made, they'll be better, blah, blah, blah. Springboks traditionally have this 20 or 30-minute period where it just naturally swings for them. But it's whether they are good enough to get the points on the back of. And, I mean, I hark back to the last World Cup game we played against them, which was that opening one in Tokyo. They had their time as well. They had a 30-minute time during the middle of the game where it was all them. But the All Blacks could hold them enough and had enough points in the bank that it still didn't become an issue. And admittedly, at 23:15 on Saturday night,
all on,
it was game on.
Scored that.
It was game on. But the thing for me, one of the absolute highlights, and I know, well, if you talk to anyone who's watched the game, the Will Jordan stocks have risen to Christian Cullen-like statuses. But
from the wing,
what he does incredibly is he spots mismatches. And what Mbompi that's the hooker's name, isn't it? He went Mbonambi. He went after him. Close. He went after him every single time he could. Yeah, it was. He spotted him 2 or 3 times. And he just skimmed him.
Poor fella.
Yeah, well, he's got bigger worries than that right now, I tell you, after what Will Jordan was doing to him. But he was just spotting him and going after him. And I think Will Jordan's impact was phenomenal. I mean, we heard when he came back during Super Rugby that his speed was up another level and power and all the rest of it. Well, I think we started to see in the weekend just how quick he actually is.
I don't even think we've seen half of the best of Will Jordan yet.
SENZ. It's Kiwi for sport.